Hello everybody, and welcome to a discussion from a suggestion from the comments from last time here. Mainly to go over all of the classes in this game, and well, just kind of see what we can see, so to speak here. So there are a hell of a lot of classes to go through, and basically the discussion was mostly over you know, what are the original uses of a lot of these classes, kind of what did One Vision do with them? Which, by the way, that is the easiest answer to like any and all. How can they improve the classes? Just do what Rakes did with One Vision. Like, man, that is just excellent, excellent tastiness all around with that one. But you know, we're here to theorize what they're going to do with Reborn. So you may notice, yeah, this is not actually a technically possible class list. It's almost like some cheats were involved. You get the idea. All right, so I'm going to go over each one, what their vanilla purpose was, kind of some of their more hidden uses, so to speak, and what I think they're going to, you know, do with them as we go forward here. So, first of all, right off the bat, the Warrior, I don't think they need to change this at all. This is actually probably one of the most well-balanced classes in the game, despite, and by the way, when I say balanced, just know that I'm just referring to their overall, like, usefulness in a lot of situations. The discussion of balance in this game is like an hour-long conversation, and it is about half my channel, so we're not gonna get into that. But anyway, so the Warrior in the vanilla game basically is just your arms master kind of guy. Their whole specialty is just they use all the weapons. You've played Mass Effect, you played the Soldier there, it's that guy. That's the basic deal there. I'm not sure why there were so many guides back in the day saying that they were worthless and you should change out of them. They're awesome. They're easily one of the best physical classes, if not the best in the game. So yeah, not sure where those hot takes came from, but yeah. As far as abilities go, can hit something twice, can hit something with 100% hit odds, and actually we should be able to see this on this other menu here. Yep, look at that pretty menu. Yeah, they're really darn good is the thing. So Vigorous Attack is basically a True Strike, and actually wait, this is One Vision. You know what? Slight redo here. Take it back a step. Vanilla, they were guaranteed a hit chance with an AoE. In One Vision, they got turned into a dodge and true strike on that same ability, whereas the 100% hit chance and crit chance, as well as the double hits, stayed the same. All right, so yeah, as far as improvements go, I don't really think they need any. One Vision's main improvement to them was basically taking that 100% hit chance, turning it into true strike and dodge. Now that's, I mean, honestly, that's about as good as you're gonna get there. You've basically got everything you need in a pretty much overall perfect physical attacker here. They can use almost every weapon class in the game, meaning they can resist almost any weapon class in the game. They can use the most loadouts of anybody. Just, you know, solid attacker, solid defender, whatever role you need, it's there. Actually, one of the things I've seen before is saying that they're really weak magically. If you stack augments, you can actually, like, even with something like a Notos or like a Rune Axe or something like that, the augments plus the spells on those weapons themselves are actually enough to make them a reasonably threatening spellcaster. So it's something that you could always do. So anyway, that's you know, neither here nor there, but it's just something fun that you could do with them. So yeah, aside from the redundancy of their AoE ability, I don't think there's really much that needs to change about this class. They're great. They're fantastic. All right, next up, the Archer. Now, we all know where this discussion's going. Did they nerf them? I want to say for the billionth time here, technically, the Archer classes always sucked. It is their weapons and general situation that was good. Because, yeah, their weapons are low penetration, high bonus damage, which... Hollow Point arrows. We're just going to go with that. Hollow Point arrows. That's basically what's going on there. If you played New Vegas, Hollow Point rounds on everybody. That's what the deal is. They get high damage if they get past armor. They have a harder time getting past armor, but dexterity scaled unusually well. They tended to get skill ranks early, which tended to throw the whole armor equation out of whack because they're running around like skills 3 or 4 ranks higher than everybody else. And yeah, suddenly, you know, if you get anybody maxed out on their weapon rank, it doesn't matter what weapon they're using, they're going to penetrate. So, you know. Anyway, so Again, I love what One Vision did with them. Basically, the vanilla version was guaranteed hit and crit, plus a double shot, plus a guaranteed shot ability, so ranged version of the warrior, basically. You got longbows, short bows, and daggers. If you ever wondered what the deal was with the daggers, dagger and short bow allows you to make a deflect or parry build. They didn't necessarily need the dagger for much fighting, but it basically allowed the save roll skills to trigger. So One Vision's take was basically turning them into Green Arrow, where they got a bunch of trick arrows. For anyone unfamiliar with like some of the crap you could do in vanilla, you basically could take any of the ninja scrolls and use them on anybody, which meant that technically, in the vanilla game, you absolutely could be running around with longbow archers, rocking silencing arrows or paralytic arrows or poison arrows, which is, it's really handy for challenge runs and things. It's a little bit cheesy, but whatever. But yeah, so technically it's something you could always do, but with the One Vision mod, they came in, they made them an official thing as part of the Art of War skill set, which basically meant that, yeah, toxic arrows, well, I mean, the poison arrows were removed, unfortunately. Hopefully one day that'll return. There were mechanical reasons why it was gone. Then recently Gibbed made a whole, like, mod tool set for this game, so who knows, maybe they'll finally be back. Please, Rakes, put in the additional multiple days of programming and whatever nonsense so that I could have my poison arrows back. I might finally actually send a $3 donation. Anyway. I'm kidding. But no. If, by the way, I'm gonna have to leave a link to Rakes' buy me a coffee thing in the description of this whole thing. Like, seriously, the dude puts in so much work, it's ridiculous. And with everything that Gibb's been doing, just like with all the information, like literally dropping from Gibbed before it ever drops from Google or anywhere else. Like, I literally have all these things on my phone of just like, I need Reborn info in a drip feed 24/7, and like, it's always like, Gibbed will get there several minutes before Google does. Anyway. So, alright, back on track here. So yeah. Trick Arrow Archers, their overall penetration was reduced quite a bit, but they were given more ranged weapon options. So in the vanilla game, you technically kind of sort of had that a little bit. You had your short bows, you had your mid bows, you had your long bows. Mid bows we're talking about stuff like great bows and what's that? I think like the recurve and stuff like that. You had some of them that were basically like the 6 to 7 range. You had others that were going up to 8 and all that kind of thing. And yeah, basically it was like longbow, siege bow, and I want to say like senilodals or whatever that had the max range. I'm probably fudging that a little bit, but it's somewhere along those lines. But yeah, by and large, most of the time it just became, you just upgrade to the next bow and you go from there. And generally speaking, they're a very basic class. Like the fun in vanilla was when you snowballed them out of control and you could just use them to cheese maps more or less. The fun in One Vision is basically using them for map control. So, for example, you're having an issue with that Cleric over there, so while they may not throw out a ton of damage, you give them a siege bow for that extra long range. Then you snipe that Cleric with a silence, and then you hit some of the faster units with paralysis and all that kind of thing. Just kind of have them sit in place and like drop debuffs on people. It feels great. It just feels very like they're doing a role aside from. In vanilla, it did occasionally get to that point where, like, since they did hit the snowball early, it felt like after a while they were eating experience off of everybody else. So, you'd have the warrior guy that's trying their best up in the front line, they're fighting everything off, barely doing scratch damage because you forgot to upgrade their stuff before going in San Bronza. And meanwhile, this guy's over there just like, yeah, sorry, just pardon me while I one-shot this golem, because, I just figured out, I just put on all this golem boosting gear. Anyway, point being, they feel fantastic in both versions. So I feel like really all they needed to do was find some way to slow down their experience crawl, for one thing. Maybe just slow down their RT. They're not the fastest class already, but slowing them down a little bit, maybe reducing their accuracy a little bit, which again, it all just comes down to the rank thing, because the ranks ended up going up fast enough. But yeah, the ranks ended up going fast enough for these guys that usually they, that early snowball was their problem. The stats, sure, they boosted their damage, but they weren't the reason that they were getting past defenses so often. So bring down their penetration slightly, give them, maybe bring down their speed a little bit. But again, the class itself is already pretty trash. It's mostly their circumstance that was the issue. So maybe, maybe more way... I feel like the trick arrows were really the way to go. Just, like, basically take away their crazy scaling options. And again, just do the one vision thing. Just, like, give them trick arrows, give them more interesting stuff to fire. I mean, if they need to follow historical stuff rather than doing the Art of War approach that One Vision did, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff that just happens. Like, if you ever watch Todd's Workshop and that kind of thing, just like say they need higher attacks, so you have them switch out for like armor penetrating. Just go for like some hardened arrows, or maybe they want to inflict fear on somebody, so they give them whistling arrows, or they want to like, let's say you have elemental arrows, which this is neither here nor there, but I would love to see more just map interaction of that kind. The other day I was playing around with the Switch, and my daughter came by. She was asking why the guy was freezing. I'm like, well, they need fire. She's like, well, go make fire. And I couldn't remember how to make fire. And just that moment of like looking through the inventory, finding fire arrows, exploding them on a cooking pot, and it's like, this feels good. Anyway, neither here nor there. It would be kind of cool to see that, but that's already one of the finishers. So maybe. I mean, the finisher already burns the ground, so I don't think we need that. Anyway, moving on. All right, wizards, they're good as they are, but I feel like they need more of an emphasis to show that they're a good debuff caster. Like, there's this thing in the early game that kind of leads a lot of people to think that casters become useless as time goes on. So in the early game, it's really like the relatively mediocre attack of the basic missile spells, because the way that they have it all set up, they would more or less need to have a hitting power that would be functional in like about the 10 to 15 range. However, when they're coming in, they're level 1 to 10, meaning that they're going to feel pretty dang powerful early on. So because of all of this, people tend to get the wrong idea that they're super powerful early on, and then they're like, wait, why did their damage drop off once the armor catches up? And so there's this thought that they become useless in the towards the end game there. But there's like, that's the thing. Their strongest thing has always been debuffs, like Balmy Breeze and stuff like that. Like, let's see, off the top of my head, Balmy Breeze and Brimstone are the two that really stick out as just like, you could absolutely turn around a fight in 1 or 2 turns just using those. I mean, they get an absolute ton of abilities. I'm actually really glad with this Reborn change where they limited it to 4 spell slots again. And I'm actually really glad to see that finishers and spell slots aren't using the same ones anymore. Basically, that was a thing. That was a bit of a problem in the classic versions. There's like, you can have finishers, or you can have spells, or you can have specials. You cannot have them all. But yeah, I'm really curious to see the kinds of stuff you can play around with in that system. But yeah, it would be nice to see more emphasis on those debuffs, but it sounds like they've already basically done that. I mean, if they've hopefully made it to a point where, you're basically locking yourself into a single tier of a spell there, basically having a debuff and then having your actual damage ability be the one that requires more MP, that's good. That's already problem solved right there. As per usual with these last few videos, coughs happen. Sorry for the random edits. Anyway, so yeah, I feel like they probably have already rebalanced this one. One thing with Meditate, though, is that skill is really dang slow to use. I'm going to assume they probably sped up the animation. I mean, they already have the fast forward button. Again, problem basically solved there. One Vision just changed it into the should have had a V8 animation. Unfortunately, that ended up getting removed later, but either way, here's the thing. I actually prefer the vanilla function of Meditate over the One Vision version, personally. And only, it's literally just a monkey brain thing of it feels good to keep using Meditate and keep seeing that MP go up, especially once you get your wizard hat, and it's like, ooh, I get more juicy numbers. And sure, it's more balanced to have it percentage based like One Vision did. But I'm just saying, it's a monkey brain thing. It feels good to see those numbers slowly ticking up for something they use every round, you know? It just, I don't know, gives the class a little bit more gravitas, but that's a personal opinion right there. Alright, next up, Clerics. So a few things here. For one thing, they take the maces and make them one-handed. Like, their issue... Okay, so in vanilla, they had a few weird issues. So their healing was not actually that much of an issue. Basically, it seemed like they really wanted to clamp down on how much healing you could actually do. I'm curious to see, you know, how this will end up playing a part later on with Reborn, because I have a feeling they'll go back to a full scaling system, but we don't know yet. But basically the way it worked is you had just a hard value for each of your spell tiers. So you had 40, 60, 80, you know, 100 there. And you could scale them up slightly, but there was a topped-out value, and you could either like rank up all their relevant stuff, or you could just use Healcraft. Either way, the result was the same, more or less same maximum there. But they had a lot of really good finishers. Like cudgels kind of get overlooked as, you know, as kind of like a joke weapon kind of thing. But once you get to stuff like Trinity Pulse, it's absolutely broken if, you know, if used in the right context. And so, like, for example, when doing the, like, solo Iron Man kind of situation, where you can't use a shop, you can't use anything else, one of the things that I tend to do in a lot of runs is basically turn the guy into a Cleric, find another Cleric, and then just kind of leave it on AI, having the two beat each other with sticks while I go to bed. The reason for this is because once you end up getting cudgels ranked up, once you have a matching like elemental type, they end up becoming absolutely ridiculous. But their actual weapon options are super weird. Early on, okay, Sibyl Staff, I don't even know why that's two-handed. It really doesn't make sense for it to be two-handed, because it has, like, it doesn't really have any amazing bonuses. It always kind of felt like the Sibyl Staff was something that was supposed to have more to it, because even when you get the upgraded version, it's weirdly expensive, and for some reason, it doesn't really give you much. I think, if I recall correctly, it just boosts mind a tiny bit. So you're better off just running them with lighter gear, like just a shield and whatever gear they can carry, whatever defensive score they can stack up. So it's kind of funky that most of the stuff that you'd expect to be on a Cleric is kind of completely backwards, wherein you really don't want to boost their actual healing whatsoever, because a buff can just do the same thing, and you really just want to boost their defense. I mean, actual skills-wise, they definitely would need to change the name of Mother's Blessing and Mother's Mercy. Again, I assume this is all going to be completely different for Reborn, because having the two right next to each other had... I mean, let's be honest, everyone's accidentally hit Mother's Mercy instead of Mother's Blessing, or vice versa. Mother's Mercy also definitely one of the funkier skills, because it removes all debuffs from yourself, but the immediate thing upon seeing it is like, oh, I can just remove all debuffs from that guy, which the purpose of the skill is more or less to make them consistent, but then they also can't use their improved healing ability. It's just kind of weird. Again, I really prefer the version that One Vision did. Shocker, I know. That's Tabula Rasa. That's basically yourself and a bubble around you, just debuffs, just gone, just feels good. They end up scaling a little better in that version, so I would assume it's going to end up being something like that. The Cleric is actually a class that you can do some pretty solid stuff with, even in multiplayer. It does kind of get, unfortunately, panned fairly often, but they're not like an offensive powerhouse or anything. Which, actually, speaking of, let's get back to the cudgels real quick. The reason that I was saying that the maces need to be made one-handed, because, like, as far as their offensive options go, the idea is supposed to be that once you get a two-handed option, that is your offensive version, and if you've invested into the cudgel skills, that's going to be the thing that's going to make your dude threatening. Now, aside from the Damask Mace, there really is not much of a point to them, because technically you could argue the initial version is the Sibyl Staff, and then it ends up becoming the Balder Mace, then it ends up becoming the Damask Mace, and then it ends up becoming the Cursed Cudgel. So, Sibyl Staff is pretty much bad no matter what way you slice it. You look at the Boulder Mace, it's okay versus undead stuff, but even with the bonus, it's rarely going to be doing too much that's useful. Like, I've specifically done a run sticking with a Boulder Mace as long as possible with a guy that was, I think, like a Beastmaster or something, and it was just not working out terribly well. Like, they basically could only hurt squishy classes with it. So, again, there's times when it's still one-shot stuff, but it just felt really funky. But then you get to the Damask Mace, and that thing is fine. Like, that thing is an absolute powerhouse of a thing. It's really good defensively. And then you get to the Cursed Cudgel, which by that point you should be able to completely break stuff anyway. It just felt weird, you know? Because their actual best weapon options weren't the maces at all, but like the Restoration Staff and the Purification Staff and stuff like that. Those had proper endgame weapon scaling all of a sudden for some freaking reason. Couldn't tell you why, but, you know, that was a thing. Anyway. So, rename, again, just basically do the one vision thing. Just rename Mother's Mercy, and, you know, just give them more stuff to do with their equipment slots. I think that's why One Vision gave them access to helmets and things like that. It's just, in vanilla, they really did not have much to do equipment-wise. It's like, did you get the second shield that they can put on yet? No? Okay, well, maybe do that. Aside from that, it's robes and pants for you, buddy. Anyway, moving on. Alrighty, next up we got the Rune Fencer slash Valkyrie slash Spellblade here. My personal favorite. Like, these guys can do absolutely everything. Not to mention they're the first spear unit you get in the game, which obviously is going to make them my favorite. But okay. What can they change on them? I don't think they needed much of a change aside from having improved spell access. Like, the one issue they had is just there was no reason not to go Divine most of the time. Because you looked at all their spell lists, and it's like, they've got missile abilities, they've got an Instill. And then you get to Divine, and they're like, yeah, they get bonus Swiftness, they get Ease, they get... I mean, I guess technically they got all the summons and things, but still. Their Divine access list was about twice as much as everything else. It just sort of felt like, you know, here you go, here's all this other crap, and here's this one. We're not saying you should, but maybe you should kind of a situation. So definitely could have, you know, maybe used some incentive to go for other elements there, which I can't help but notice it looks like they've potentially done with Reborn. Because, yeah, the one time they actually showed a Valkyrie so far, they were basically running two different spell types for some reason. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. They definitely still got access to bonus Swiftness, but it seems like the Divine stuff is just going to be there for utility, and then all the rest of it is going to be there for their actual element, which is a good change. One Vision's version of this was basically exactly that, just give them more stuff to do. As well as gave them Fated Circle, which is basically what used to be the Warrior thing, except in a more targeted area, so you had 100% hit chance buff. And they also got innate throwing item abilities, which, yeah, I hope Reborn does that. I don't think they will, because it is kind of out of nowhere, just kind of an experimental, fun change, but it is definitely a fun thing to do. So, it's just nice. It kind of gives them that nice little jack-of-all-trades thing. They feel great. They feel great. Honestly, any version of them I've liked so far, so I can't say there's too much that I would really change about this one. Alright, next up here we got Knights. Alright, once again, we're gonna go down how One Vision improved the hell out of them. So, okay, when it comes to Knights, they've been kind of weird throughout the series. In the original, like, basically in the original Tactics Ogre and the original Ogre battle, they were sort of a frontline grunt with barely better defense. And in fact, I believe the Berserker actually had better defense than the Knight, because the Knight basically served the same role as the Rune Fencer the Rune Fencer would later replace when it came to the original Tactics Ogre, where they were just sort of the more agile frontline fighter type situation for whatever reason. I mean, I appreciate the the steering away from stereotypes by having the Knights actually be agile, because historically they were, but, still. Alright, anyway, have I mentioned coughs are annoying? Because I'm sure these edits sure are getting annoying. Alright, so, they, in vanilla, they were your slow, plodding frontline kind of situation. They did that job particularly well until players realized that they could abuse the hell out of Phalanx, because the AI could not recognize the difference between a Phalanx unit and a regular unit, meaning that they would gladly dump all their finishers onto a naked guy with Phalanx activated, and then wonder where all their TP went. So yes, potentially very, very abusable. Their healing abilities were okay. But again, unfortunately, just like the Rune Fencer, just like the Lord, just like many other classes, they had the unfortunate thing where they were heavily implied to go down the Divine Tree element-wise. I mean, you put Light, you put Healing, you give your Knight the Brynhilder later on. It was kind of an easy go-to kind of thing. Which, okay, it fits with a stereotype. They're supposed to be a good boy, but anyway. So Phalanx, definitely very abusable. The Rampart Shadow thing, friggin' awesome. Actually, I was wondering where the balance of it all came from until trying the One Vision version and realizing just how hard you could abuse that. So yes, absolutely, a Rampart Shadow should be almost as much as a finisher. I'm actually completely okay with that cost. Although TP's gone, so I don't know how they're going to rebalance that cost moving into Reborn here. For one thing that One Vision definitely did improve is their kind of vibes of being a command, field commander kind of situation, giving them Aegis to go boost health regeneration as well as defense, because they had Rally in vanilla, but it came so late that I guarantee many people didn't realize they even had Rally. I mean, again, over a decade of challenge runs, I never realized that they had Rally until it was mentioned in the One Vision patch notes. So, it just showed up so late that, you probably didn't notice it. Anyway, so yeah, that general vibe definitely helps. Just having them be more of a field support unit definitely helps. So yeah, definitely nerf Phalanx. I haven't seen any indication of Phalanx making a comeback. I have a feeling, though. That they actually moved this into those what looks like stances there, because they've got like defensive stances and evasive stances and whatever else. I have a feeling that they're gonna have something very similar to Phalanx within those stances. So I have a feeling, once again, this is a problem that they've probably already solved. So anyway, moving right along here. Yeah, there's two more things that I would change about Knights. For one thing, give them spears. Why can't they have spears? Like, they've already got spears in the game. They have so few classes that use spears. Original Tactics Ogre Knights use spears. They, and I'll tell you why they can't use spears in a moment. And then, yeah, Knight of Lotus Knights absolutely did awesome using spears, but what can you do, right? So you know why they couldn't get spears? Because it's the same thing that it's one of the more fun things you can do with the Valkyrie or Rune Fencer here. You put down a barricade and you use a long-range spear. Meanwhile, the Knight could basically do the same thing, but arguably better if they did that. So that's probably why they didn't want to do it. They wanted to differentiate them more, so they gave them more axes and hammers and things. Which, fair, I guess. It just, it would have been nice to see them get a alternate version of spears. Like, say you have the Valkyrie and all of them with light spears, and you have the Knights with heavy spears, which is kind of the total opposite of what One Vision did, but, it works. As long as they've got different spears to use, I'm okay with that. Alright, next up we got the Terror Knight. One that, I've made fun of in the past, but it's honestly kind of a fantastic unit. It's just weird to use. So, the Terror Knight's main gimmick is the fear skill. So I say the fear skill, but there's multiple fear skills. But basically, they can skip all stat checks and whatever else and inflict fear regardless. So Terrifying Impact and Lament of the Dead, which for anyone who missed it, it's the one and only way that you can move down defense rating in the middle of a fight. Meaning that if there's a unit that you simply cannot punch through because you don't have the skills or the weapon or whatever else on that unit, you use fear on them, and more than likely it will, like, basically their defense no longer exists. So, you know, they're a really, really good crippling unit, but they got a bunch of nerfs to make up for that. So they're kind of slow, but they can be a spellcaster, but they also have really weird gear axes, which, by the way, one thing I hope Reborn does do, especially because they're re-releasing the art book, give them one-handed swords. You have so much art of them using one-handed swords, like every friggin' picture of them shows them going sword and board, but you're not going to give them sword and board. They can't use it in game. They can only use two-handers. So yeah, ultimately their best thing ends up being hammer and shield, so it's not like the shield was the busted part, and it's not like swords are particularly busted for them either. I mean, swords suck if they're going down a dark elemental route, which again is a little bit funny, because as far as augments go, while they got their, like, every guide that I saw was recommending augment dark on their spell list. Despite that, there's only technically three, though realistically two, abilities that actually benefit from using Aug Dark. Alright? Unless they've got, like, the Headsman or something equipped, or they're going for the Dark Deed set or whatever. Basically, the only reason for them to use Aug Dark is to boost the penetration rating of Drain Health or Drain Mind. Drain Power doesn't have a defense score associated with it, so it usually just tends to go through regardless, so they actually were very effective finisher spammers. But, I mean, in vanilla, basically the optimal play for a Terror Knight, give them a good finisher type loadout, TP+, you give them Spellcraft, you give them Aug Dark, and then you go for, Aug Dark if you've got something to benefit Aug Dark from. Again, Drain Power, all it's really going to do is boost it by like 4, so there's not a whole lot of reason to use it, I guess. But you then use Drain Power on anything at range, you steal all their TP, and then you go and, you smack somebody real good. Usually, actually, it would be a better approach to go in, use Lament of the Dead to make sure their defense no longer exists, and then make use of your crazy damage scaling finishers. So usually something like a Hammer and Shield is going to be the better approach for that. Specifically, sticking with a Baldur loadout set, so that you can have better intelligence for those more offensive abilities, which again are very few and far between. There's only 3. But you can potentially do some pretty fun stuff with that, and especially around the mid game, you can really abuse that for some fun results. All right. So yeah, One Vision's approach to this was to leave them largely the same, but change the health MP and power drains to percentage based, and then give them more weapon options like heavy spears. So not a whole lot changed. They also got the ability to explode shadows. So that's a fun little combo. You can the Terror Knight and Knight combo feels very similar to if you've played XCOM 2, like Reapers and Sharpshooters. You have one of them throw down a Claymore, then suddenly you have the Sharpshooter run out and like lightning hands the Claymore and then face off everything on the map. It's yeah. Anyway, so it feels similar to that. You have the Knight drop down a shadow, you have this guy come in just like boom, and suddenly they're doing the equivalent of a weapon hit in that explosion. So for Reborn, I would assume all they're probably going to do is just boost their defense rating a little bit. Honestly, aside from that, they were already a pretty fun class to work with. Maybe make them a little bit faster, would make them a little bit more satisfying, but they're one of those units that can snowball very quickly if built right. So basically, if you've ever gone down, if you've gone down Law, and you've tried to take on Gatalio, yes, technically his level is higher, but basically, if you ignore that number is there, a properly optimized Terror Knight would be at about that level, wherein they can snowball to the point where they're pretty friggin' oppressive, and they've got a bunch of shutdown abilities, they've got a lot of area control abilities, and if they end up ranking up Lament of the Dead, like, it is absolutely crippling. Like, sure, the 30% hit chance isn't amazing early on, but every rank of that, it becomes more and more devastating to the point where it is a locked-in, unresistible 60% hit chance by the end of it in a large AoE. I mean, that's just going to absolutely crush. So, either way. Moving on. Alright. Berserkers, I don't think I'd change them at all. They're just plain fun, as they are. Also, I find it funny that I missed this, by the way. I kept wondering what this friggin' icon was. Every time I was looking at the Reborn thing, I never look at this icon. It's been the same. Again, I've been staring at this crap for over a decade, and I don't recognize the "this guy can swim" icon. Anyway, okay. So, I mean, they're just fun as they are. Sanguine Assault is just a really fun, you hit thing real hard move. Their weapon loadout is fun. Wind Vision did change one thing in terms of giving them two-handers. That's a pretty fun approach. I mean, how are you going to have a friggin' barbarian sword, but the barbarian character can't use it? Like, just the fact that they can use knives is pretty funny. Again, would be kind of fun to use spears with them, only because when you do weird stuff, like in One Vision, you can use Berserk and you can use spears. And it's just kind of fun because you can basically do all kinds of weird attack angles with it. Like, you know, you go poke that guy over there and you're suddenly smacking away the two guys on the sides. It just feels good, you know? And then suddenly you get a counter that's a double tile. It's just a nice little active change that happens there, but that's technically not really the Berserk class itself, it's just more the skill. So the vanilla version, I think, is fine. Like, they force others to take damage for them. That feels very appropriate. Sanguine Assault is just fun to use. Their weapon loadout's nice. Not really much I would change there. Alright, now we get to a weird one in the Swordmaster. First and foremost... Oh, scratch that. First and foremost, more editing. Joy. Alright. So, Swordmasters are basically the melee frontliner equivalent to the Cleric, wherein they've got some very funky limitations on their gear. So, despite being the Swordmaster, of the 4 kinds of swords, they can only equip 1. So, yes, two-handed katanas. The general logic seemed to be for this class to essentially be low armor so that stuff targets them, and you use preempt in order to knock stuff out of the way, and you use deflect to smack arrows out of the way, you know, do the usual like anime samurai nonsense that no samurai frickin' did because they would just probably get a frickin' gun. Anyway, so okay, you know, they're fun in that regard, but they're really just okay. First of all, the vitality thing, you more or less gotta stack them for vitality to give them any odds of survivability. In fights where there's a lot of ranged and magic stuff flying around, they end up struggling. Their heal ability, I'm hoping it is either completely reworked or removed. Like, so for the dances, I would be... If the dances were entirely removed, just outright, I think I would prefer this class. Because when you end up giving them to... like, just give them access to dark magic or something, just like the original. In the original version, you basically just had support abilities on them, which is fine. In Knight of Lotus, again, support abilities worked just fine. They were arguably kind of overpowered, plus they had an inbuilt 20%, actually no, I think it was like 30-something% damage bonus in all situations. Which, yeah, somebody's been, like, deep diving into Knight of Lotus lately to figure out the weirdness in the code, and yeah, they had the highest damage scaling in the game. But the thing is, like, they just plain don't work. The war dances, they take too long. Typically they have like a 15-second freaking animation every time that you want to use one. The heal ability barely does anything. Mass Strengthen is nice, Mass Fortify is nice. Most of the time you don't even want to use them because they cost money to use and they take a really long time to cast, so you're probably just going to be like, well, let me just use a friggin' like a basin or an Aryan plume or whatever. Use them on that guy, because I don't really feel like going and taking my entire lunch break for this guy to buff some units, you know? Okay, their debuff removal thing was kind of unreliable. Okay, one more at it later. But yeah, so their mass charm thing is fairly unreliable. Their mass stun thing is occasionally okay. But the thing is, they don't have a shield. They don't have access to many armors. Like, especially towards the late game, I believe Wormscale is the best that they've got as far as vitality and hard defense goes. I mean, even against, like, when I was going and just running a bunch of unit versus unit tests, Swordmasters just by far wound up on the bottom of the pile against absolutely everything. I mean, for crap's sake, they lost to Clerics. It's like they're just... It's a rough world for them. The idea is supposed to be that nothing can really counteract Swordmasters except for Swordmasters, but the problem is their actual bar is fairly low. So, while technically they should have the highest penetration in the game, technically, because their Mighty Strike thing is one of the few things that'll boost actual attack value rather than just strength, it usually doesn't really matter. Because again, usually they're going to want to use Preempt instead. Which, I mean, Preempt is awesome. Basically, if you combine it with Knockback, you have the equivalent of Hamido from FFT. But again, that's assuming that someone's just going to do a basic attack. If they use a finisher, doesn't matter. If they use a ranged attack, it doesn't matter. If they use any kind of casting, doesn't matter. So the majority of damage types just completely bypass their one means of defense. They don't really have the offense to be that threatening on their own, and their best offensive shutdown options more or less require them to have been alive for a while. So for example, like Stone Bloom and a high mind score, or something like the Makwahatl. But yeah, it's a rough time for them. So One Vision, again, came in and fixed these problems. They gave them access to all the swords, for one thing. They gave them access to dual wield, which again, if they're going for the maximum weeb vibes, they should be able to dual wield. They got access to Mind's Eye, which used to be a ninja's ability, which basically meant that they just completely avoid all melee attacks, which is honestly a lot more useful than Preempt in a lot of cases. Sure, it does preclude the ability to counter, but in a lot of cases, or actually it doesn't even preclude the ability to counter. In a lot of cases, it's just far more useful, and just more universally applicable. Not to mention Preempt, because they have more defensive options. Potentially, they can they can pick and choose the kinds of things that are going to be hitting them. See, part of the problem with the logic in vanilla of giving them low overall defense is that it basically meant that pretty much anything with, well, a decent, mediocre to high attack score could get through the limited defenses they had just fine. The problem with this is that it also meant that ranged units tended to pick them out all the time, which also meant that unless you had them surrounded by squishy units or permanently had Fortify on them, which again is kind of implied to be what they're going for, that they go in with relatively lackluster stuff, they put on Fortify, suddenly damage is scaling down, but they're the one getting picked out. Again, the logic is kind of fuzzy on all that stuff. But one way or another, they're consistent, but they're bad is the problem. They end up getting picked off by range units and getting picked off by casters. I mean, most of the time, even when I get a Hobram just playing through a random vanilla thing, I just turn them into a Fusilier because it's funny, or just literally anything else. It's a class that's kind of a fun gimmick, but it just doesn't work. But again, One Vision's version gives them the ability to get more armor types, gives them the ability to use parrying daggers instead of a shield, gives them access to, to different, pretty much just better versions of those war dances. Not to mention gives them an MP cost instead of causing you to spend resources on those buffs every time. I mean, Harvest Dance? Why? Why do you have to spend several $100 to go use an ability that barely heals anybody for anything? So either way, it's an interesting class. They tried to carry over a bit too much from FFT because the resource cost of those fans was presumably supposed to, kind of mimic the fact that you occasionally could break swords in FFT by using their abilities. I appreciate the reference, but I don't think they should have gone that route with it. Just having an MP cost makes a lot more sense. They need to speed up the animation, need to give them just better defensive options. Honestly, their offense having a low top bar is fine. Consistent but not crazy powerful is fine. Oh, whoops. Sorry, screen fell off. But yeah, as they are, yeah, they are... The One Vision version is fun, but still kind of occasionally flimsy. The vanilla version absolutely hurts. But then again, none of them can hold a candle to how good the Knight of Lotus Swordmaster was, but moving on. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't know, yeah, Knight of Lotus throwing stone attack is also added to the One Vision version, but that's neither here nor there. Moving on. Alright, Dragoons kinda need a lot of stuff done to them. So, on paper, they're supposed to be, the dedicated Monster Slayer unit. They're the one that one-shots dragons and things, which is a little bit odd for their overall role. Like, in many ways, I almost wonder if that maybe should have been the Swordmaster's thing. Because, like, throughout the series, the Dragoon was the upgrade to the Knight. That they could kill dragons and things because they were just really sturdy and solid frontline fighters. For some reason, they became anti-dragon crossbow snipers. I mean, alright, I guess. Historical nod in terms of the long-range sniping stuff. Like, overall stats-wise, basically lower than Warrior and Knight and Terror Knight. So, kind of odd that as far as frontline fighting goes, they're on the weaker end. Again, this is for vanilla there. Okay, not sure what that noise was. Anyway. So yeah, overall, pretty flimsy as far as fighting on the front lines, not very threatening on the front lines, and most of the time you're just better off giving them a crossbow, letting them snipe stuff, that kind of business. So, as far as the improvements go and what I think they will do, change their ranged options. I mean, they need more of a reason to be getting up close. They're supposed to be the frontline scary knight guys, not snipers. I would definitely say get rid of the heavy crossbow option entirely. I mean, basically all the other frontline guys have access to light crossbows or light bows, because historically that was a thing that would happen, that knights would go out and they'd be like, well, I have this bow gun, let me just, shoot it, get rid of it, and then, get back to my actual business. So it made sense to allow for light crossbow and melee weapon type builds, because it's a thing that people would do. In this case, I think they only gave them heavy crossbows because historically the quote-unquote Dragoon was basically a cavalry rifleman. So maybe they were just kind of going for something along those lines, because there are a lot of historical nods in this game. But, One Vision version, as per usual, ended up liking that one the most. You got better defensive options on them. They have access to pistols, which is a way better Dragoon reference. Come to think of it, yeah, I say riflemen, they were shield and gun, weren't they? Anyway, so that's that whole thing. And yeah, I mean, they really didn't need too much tweaking. They just needed to be made bulkier, and they needed to hit harder. They did have some of the better... They had better equipment access than Lord, oddly enough. So pretty much gear was one of their weird go-tos, which is hard to quantify. So I would just say, yeah, they needed a little bit of a rework in terms of getting pushed more towards close range. We haven't seen anything about Dragoons in the remake, or re-remake. So hopefully we'll see more of that soon. I really hope that they give more of an incentive to use two-handers, like some kind of leverage, bonus or something. Maybe just better bonus damage in general. Feels like that should be the two-handers thing. But again, One Vision solved that problem, because having a Dragoon with a two-hander basically gave them just obscenely high maximum damage. But again, it's because they had an ability that allowed them to ignore defense. Alright, moving on. So, ninjas. Okay. I know this is a broken record. You know, one vision did it. So, okay. Very fast, high dexterity, all that kind of thing. Everyone already knows. 1HKs are sometimes held up as being broken. They're not so bad. Again, kind of similar to the bow situation. More so, we're looking at a situation where around rank 4 or 5, they start penetrating armor, they get all the bonuses, you know, that whole shtick. But they train much faster because they've got 2 attacks going on. So we do know that for Reborn, it looks like double attack will be available sooner. Very possibly there may not be a level limit on that at all, which would be pretty nice. In classic TO, they basically could double attack with anything right off the bat. So, you know, if you wanted to give them double axes or whatever, you could. Would say they would need a couple extra weapon options just to give them something more to do. Like, 1HKs are a really boring weapon. Daggers, they don't get access to most daggers. They get access to short bows, which works well with their, with adding poison to their weapons and things. But again, I have a feeling we'll end up seeing a lot more of that, with ninjas being the dedicated trick shot type characters, since we presumably won't be having scroll usage in fights anymore. Again, it seems like they took One Vision's lead on that one. And I know, officially, they probably will never admit that they would have played something like that, and from a balance perspective, it's something that, as designers, I'm sure they would have already figured out themselves. But, it's just fun to poke fun at this kind of stuff sometimes. So, what they did have, though, and what was completely broken, was Steel Stance. So, it actually was really cool to see some of the Ninja and Swordmaster stuff switched around for OV. Wherein, Swordmaster's got Steel Stance because they need the ability to turn off the aggro sometimes. And ninjas, they would like the ability to not get hit by stuff sometimes. So, that was a fun little swap around as far as those went. As far as ranged options go, I mean, they were always pretty alright. I mean, I usually liked running a 1HK and short bow, but that's only because dual wield feels really dumb in a lot of situations. It's funny because thinking back on it, I used to hate a lot of the way that this class was handled. I mean, thinking about it now, honestly, they're a really fun class to play around with. It's mostly just that the way that it was implemented was a little bit awkward. So, for example, with the spells and things, there really isn't a lot conveyed in terms of, again, how armor works. So a lot of times it felt like, wait a minute, why do I always do one, but the AI just always one-shots people? So, what happened here? So hopefully they do have some kind of, effective damage gradient or something. I don't know, something along those lines. Where they basically say, like, maybe this will work or won't. It probably would be too difficult to put in UI-wise, but I'm sure they'll have something better conveyed. But yeah, in general, it just would be nice to have less only running around with 1HKs kind of situation. So yeah, more daggers, more weapon options, do the OV thing where you get rid of reagents and you have them... Honestly, I don't even... Okay, get rid of one or the other. You either get rid of MP cost or you get rid of reagents. Because honestly, I kind of liked the whole reagents thing where you can basically just use all these different tools and things, It felt good. It did feel like many of them were unreasonably expensive. Like, looking around at a lot of the tools that they're using, they look like they would specifically be stuff that would be, kind of ghetto assassin stuff, like friggin' like, throwing daggers and things feel like they should probably be pretty cheap. For that matter, why can't they just use the throwing daggers as throwing daggers instead of weird anime nonsense? I don't know. Again, adding poison to the shurikens for One Vision, definitely a solid choice. Actually, when doing suboptimal for that one, one thing that I noticed was that I was forced to change a character to a ninja partway through, and they still wound up being effective just on account of having those, poison throwing daggers. So, So yeah, as far as changes go, definitely more weapon options would be needed. I have a feeling they'll probably end up giving them a little bit more to play around with. Um, Hopefully they got rid of steel stance. I know I mentioned it as an issue and never really elaborated. Basically, the problem with steel stance is that it allows them to completely turn off aggro. So if they're ever in danger, they're just like, nope, I'm not here anymore, and they functionally become invisible because it raises their armor value. Like, with something like Phalanx, it basically gives them complete reduction in incoming damage by 90%, whereas Steel Stance actually raises their physical defense to the point where nothing wants to target them. I know it's a weird distinction to make, but that's just kind of how that goes. Anyway. Yeah, hopefully less weeb crap on this class, but oh well. I kind of like their spy vibes through most of the rest of the series, and would definitely like to see more of the March of the Black Queen stuff. Like, where's that machine gun knife situation, you know? I want the ability to just throw a crap load of daggers out. Because they gave them that in March of the Black Queen and Knight of Lotus, and then just nowhere else for some reason. And again, the single hit elemental weakness to oddly specific elements type stuff, which weirdly enough we never saw again in the Ogre games, but we did see that in like Tactics Advance with the Bishop. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so Rogue, the premier heavy crossbow sniper. A very, very confused class that, well, it needed a few changes. So the one vision approach was great. They increased the range of steel by 2 tiles, gave them all the light ranged weapons, pretty decent amount of medium ranged weapons, and then gave them throwing weapons and things, and yeah, they're just like the fast skirmisher thief kind of situation. The vanilla version was very odd because it's almost like they were throwing ideas at the wall and just like whatever they had time to program in. Like Sprogmos, it's an AoE wind attack. Why? It just kind of felt out of place there. Steel needed a very, very major experience boost. Because steel is weird. If you stick to it, consistently, you do get a lot of really useful crafting stuff, and it's just a nice thing to use. But it's very high cost, and it takes forever to get it ranked up at all. Which means that you're going to be, rocking several hundred bronze bars that you're never going to do anything with before you're suddenly getting bolder. Not that you completely couldn't, it's just, it took a while to get ranked up. So I kind of wish that there was a little bit of a bonus for some skills, like say you use them and then use them over and over and over, and then you basically just kind of multiply experience based on how many times you used it. Kind of just like a momentum experience type system, where just like you keep using it and using it and using it, and so you end up getting a lot faster ranks, but only on fairly mundane skills. So I have a feeling that we probably won't see any ranking at all for steel, because we haven't seen any indication. Well, we haven't seen any indication of it even existing technically for Reborn. I'm sure it will, but I'm gonna throw a theory out there that it won't have a rank this time around. That it's just gonna be like the equivalent of rank 5 or so from the original, and then they're just gonna roll with that. Because that would sort out the problem right away. I mean, sure, technically they should be getting better at stealing over time, but it's unlike Meditate, it never really felt that good to use, because usually you were just getting complete trash, comparatively speaking. I mean, One Vision kind of, I feel almost over-incentivized it in some ways, because like it doesn't check for elevation, which leads to this funny situation where technically you could shield bash somebody off of a cliff and then steal from them at the bottom, which is just some complete Wile E. Coyote logic, and I love that, but it doesn't really really fit, so to speak. So yeah, I guess my point in all this is just either increase the range or decrease the cost. Either one of those would work just fine for this particular skill. Yeah, other than that, they were fine. Like Sprogmos, a very weird choice for this class. They don't need an AoE burst, like in any situation. I mean, I can remember maybe 1 or 2 times where I actually wanted to use it. It's just, it doesn't fit, so I don't know why they put it in there. I know One Vision ended up moving it over to the Griffin, where it makes a lot more sense. So, yeah. Get rid of Sporogmos, and as with always, just do the One Vision thing. I mean, this is the easiest comparison list in history. Predictions. They sort of did One Vision, but probably not quite as well, but it'll be enough for us to spend $50. There we go. Alright, Fusilier. They need one change. Sharpshoot needs to become something else. Guaranteed crit and knockback and everything is fine, but I mean, course correction basically already does that. Just give them the silver bullet ability that the priest ended up getting in One Vision. Fusilier's had it for a while, but just basically an undead kill shot kind of thing. Works just fine. I feel like that was the perfect balance for them. Other than that, they're great. Just basically high penetration with low maximum damage. Fits perfectly. And again, one of those ones that seemed really weird in terms of how they got so low. Well, okay, actually, it's less the class that needs changes. The gear. There needs to be earlier access somehow, like side quests or something. Because it's very strange how they gave them their 6 initial weapons, as well as some daggers, and then they're like, well, there's 3 or 4 really good ones. They're basically all in the same spot of POTD. You're just gonna go dig them out of a random sewer for some reason. It's just like, why are they all, way over there, basically? Kind of out of the way, it kind of felt like it would have been maybe more appropriate to, I don't know, get one of them from the Fire Temple or something. Maybe have the shotgun side quest result in getting one of them, because it has no purpose otherwise. Like, if you get this crazy good gun that basically nobody can use until you get a high-level Fusilier, that feels good. That's a good change. Like, if you got the long gun from that or something, So, kind of an awkward one, but I feel like that's really the only 2 changes that would need to happen. Alright, moving on. Beast Tamer wouldn't change a thing. That one's fine. Except for making thrown weapons, again, like One Vision, where they're just a weapon instead of having to constantly pay for new ones. Anyway, moving on. Warlocks. Alright, they need one of the Lich abilities, which is which would probably be that reflection ability. Because, like, the Lich needs completely different stuff on it. I feel like Warlocks don't really feel... They feel like a barely anything upgrade to the basic caster. Draconics are technically good, but way too expensive to use in a practical sense, especially for longer maps. A lot of their buffs just can be gotten from other places. Like, why would you spend several hundred on worm gems to use healcraft on somebody when you can just use fairy powder on that? Regeneration is nice. Just basically a lot of their stuff that they brought over from TO Classic is nice. Can probably ditch some of the D&D references. No one's ever going to use detect traps. It's a cool little nod, but no one's ever going to use it. Or at least make it map wide, But they need the Night of Lotus thing. They need, like, a melee component if they're constantly going to describe them as, like, part fighter, part scholar. Just having access to more daggers is not really good. Basically just any light weapons are fine. Having their sword specialization in Night of Lotus is really good. One Vision's thing of giving them 1 HKs and swords, again, feels fantastic. That's just simply, like, it's been done perfectly. Just do that. Alright, next up, Lich. So, I know, this is a shocker, but One Vision already did this. Inbuilt teleportation, this is kind of a given. I mean, they're supposed to be crazy powerful Giga Wizards. I'm pretty sure they can just teleport everywhere now. That's fine. For one thing, they would need to be accessed in a less annoying manner. Like, it's kind of a cool thing that they just have to use that ring in that one particular location, but it hasn't worked that way the whole rest of the series, so it feels a little weird that you suddenly have to go to one spot at a Palace of the Dead in order to use a Ring of the Dead. So bring back the old resurrection mechanic for one thing. For another thing, make them actually undead. And I know it hasn't worked that way any other time in the series, but, you know, make them actually undead this time. And yeah, as far as spells go, well, give them, I don't know, give them oppressively good mind, I would think, is probably the best way to go. Like, maybe sacrifice some other stuff, maybe take away all melee weapon options or something, but just really, really good debuff accuracy feels like it'd be really solid for the Lich. Just like, stealing MP from stuff around them or sharing MP to stuff around them feels very... It feels too neutral for a class that's supposed to be straight evil. And Reflection feels like it's disappointing most of the time. That definitely feels like something that'd be more on kind of like a, well, you know, a grave robber kind of fancy wizard like the Warlock there. For the Lich, it feels like they need something scarier, like the ability to change the weather or something, you know? They just don't feel powerful. They just feel... Well, you know, like in Night of Lotus where they turn into a carpet and fly away? They feel like a carpet. They're there. You know, they might be interesting to look at, but... I mean, you're not really looking at that thinking, wow, that's threatening. It's just a carpet. So, I don't know. Hopefully they, you know, they make them a bit more of an actual presence in Reborn. Alright, moving on. Lord. Okay, main thing I'll change with Lord, for one thing, just let them unlock the skills that they actually can unlock. It's really annoying that you only get so many Lord marks, and you have to go back to other classes to actually unlock those skills. And then you realize, oh crap, now I have to travel back in time to get recognized as, you know, being a king. It just feels weird. And for another thing, I understand that this was part of the skill system, so I would expect this to change, but I hope they can finally equip all items again. They were very heavily skewed towards Divine in the remake. So, for example, when I was doing solo, my original plan was to go Lord and go for like a Dark Spear build. Ultimately ended up having to stick with Dragoon because the Lord couldn't use most of the equipment that I wanted for that run. So, anyway. And by the way, most of that was because of debuff resistances, like stop proof, stun proof, slow proof, all that kind of thing, like fear proof. Yeah, Lord couldn't access most of that stuff, which was pretty annoying. Right, Ranger. Alright, so Ranger. So One Vision's approach to this was to actually give him his cutscene powers, so he can warp and stab and all that kind of thing. I would take it a bit of a different approach, personally, because I think he needed evade. Like, he needed a lot of the stuff that Azelston came with. Because for a guy that's supposed to have been all self-sufficient throughout most of the game, and, you know, barely relied on his mostly dead party, he is one of the worst solo fighters in the game. I don't, like, with his absolute garbage defense and resistance, I don't know how this dude got anywhere. But yeah, he needed more defensive options, like an evade, an intercession, something like that, you know? And I have a feeling they'll probably at least end up tweaking up his defenses a little bit. Maybe they'll still end up going deeper into glass cannon territory. It just feels like when you're fighting him as a boss, the dude's all scary, and then you get him and he's kind of a puppy. So, I don't know. I feel like they definitely need to tweak up the defense more than anything. You know what? Before we move on to the priest, actually, I just noticed that I completely did the Warlock dirty here. When it comes to One Vision, like, they made them the item specialist. They kind of just made him an alchemist, and that change was absolutely beautiful. Basically, they turned TP into a basic health item, basic MP item, or basic TP boost, which is just absolutely perfect. There is so much. Oh, and also they have the they're the second class that can throw items. Just that kind of like chemist slash scholar slash fighter kind of thing really gives them the adventurer vibes that they wanted that class to go for. So just absolutely feels wonderful as far as that goes. So yeah, definitely one of the best. I can't believe I completely overlooked that, but this one's been running a bit long. What can I say? It's getting fuzzy. It does that. Old man brain. Moving on. Alright, priest. Not really a whole lot to change there, really. I mean, they're a freaking priest. What do you want? Maybe give them more gear options, but honestly, they're okay as is. Most of the time, people would be moving on to the princess. So, princess, what do we change here? Again, just do the One Vision thing. They get spears. Cool. Moving on. Heretic. Just let's try this thing where we actually give them gear options. Problem with a lot of the high-end spellcasters is they've got nothing for equipment. It's basically all just like robes +1, hat +1, stick, maybe shield. And, yeah, that's about it. They just don't have much gear changes going on. Like, it would be cool to see, like, an almost Morrowind type situation where, like, you fight a caster, and then you go back and you find, you know, how they had all of this custom-made gear and whatever else. Which, you do have some of that with the higher-end items in this game, and it just would be cool to see lower-end versions of that. Where it's like you run to a caster, and it's like, okay, they couldn't... You know, they didn't have the, you know, skill investment to be able to use this paralysis ability, but they had it, you know, enchanted into their gloves, or, you know, they had, like, let's say they had weapons that allowed them to do certain things. It's just, they need more of that, I don't know, just more scholarly vibes to it. It just feels like they don't really adapt more than throw the book at people, you know? So, feels like they could be doing more there. Heretic, I mean, she's got a couple of abilities in the form of her, you know, poisoning ability, and that other one that's like curse or something. But again, why are they close range? There's no point for them to be there. It just doesn't really work. It feels like, if anything, she needed that rogue sneak attack ability. You know, she was the one that needed that one. Oops. It would help to not shut the thing off. Also, by the way, if you suddenly hear a noise, the cat has gotten very annoyed at me in the other room for some reason. By the way, for the princess, as far as her abilities, okay, Lucky Star is what... Not Lucky Star. Actually, it is Lucky Star. That's whatever. I hope they don't change Princess's Whim, because it is one of the most hilariously underwhelming things I've ever seen. Okay, another edit there. Gonna have to wrap this one up soon for health reasons. But no, honestly, Princess's Whim is one of the most hilariously underwhelming abilities that I absolutely adore for that reason. Because it just backfires almost all of the time. You get her so late that it'll probably never end up ranking up. And it's just straight up funny to see her constantly hyping herself up, only to accomplish absolutely nothing. Oh, it's just hilarious to see. Alright, next up, Paladin. Give somebody else access to this. Or, I mean, I guess at this point, the class is kind of built into the person, so I guess it's fine as it is. He's just a slightly different White Knight. I mean, honestly, it's fine. Whatever. You get him for the character, not the class. Same thing for the Astromancer. Just more gear, like most of the spellcasters here. We're just going to rapid-fire the rest of these. Vartan needs the ability to go a bit faster. I don't know why his movement cost is so dang high. Other than that, it seems like they're mostly keeping the same thing for this guy. I mean, overall... Okay, their options can work, but the way that they can be made to work is a little bit of an annoyance. Because he comes in with axe and bow. Now, the way I read this is it's supposed to be an OB64 reference, because in that one they run axe and spell. But he doesn't get access to his missile spells until a few levels later, so they give him a short bow instead. Weird workaround to a problem you created, but okay. So, anyways, though, he doesn't really... Like, as far as I recall, he basically is one of the few cases where you can run both spellcraft and an augment on a class that would still be able to use, you know, higher tier spells just off of equip items, like a Boreas and stuff like that. But that said, like, he's just, for all of the benefits that he can get as a spellcaster, he's also balanced against it, meaning that he would have to put in a kind of excessive amount of investment, skill-wise, into being able to use those spells in order to be able to actually function as a tribred. Now, that said, we still did see a tribred happening in the actual leaks that we've gotten so far, well, and the marketing material that we've gotten so far. So it is very possible that with the new kind of reworked element system, that he actually will be more viable in that case. Again, would be nice to see the one vision thing where you've got like Huapango wins, which will give you regen and sidestep. You get increased movement range as well as resistance off of El Colas. It gives you a reason to use both of them. The original vanilla version was very lackluster. Huapango, I believe was just air reverse on enemy units, which, like, unless you already were piercing armor with the, you know, limited options you had for spell casting and stuff like that, like if he equipped spellcraft and then buffed himself with spellcraft and then used, like, you know, wind shot 2 or something, then maybe he'd get somewhere with it. It's funny because even in the promo art he's shown carrying a stick. It's just, it doesn't, like, it's awkward, you know? He's a class that can't really, he can't move terribly fast, despite supposedly being a fast unit. For some, like I mentioned earlier, for some reason he's got some of the highest movement costs in the game. So he doesn't get his turns very often. You've already got a bow, so basically your options are either, like, you use this one skill over here and it's super easy to accomplish what you want done, or you go well out of your way to equip, like, 4 or 5 times as many different skills, as well as completely reworking your build to work as a spellcaster, tribrid, whatever kind of situation over here, on the very oddly specific situation that you want to get close to somebody, give them air reverse, then fly away, then hit them with a wind shot. And it's just like, why not just use counter? Just use counter and fly away and shoot a bow. Why are you going through this whole song and dance? Going through all this rigmarole just to make it look fancy. Like, it's odd. So I'm kind of hoping with the new reworked element system that maybe there'll be a reason for him to be a tribrid. We'll also see, I don't think they'll end up making it unique to him. Again, just kind of a funky thing where they gave him a semi-unique class, but not really. White Knights were just fantastic in the original. Lots of weapon options, great buffs, great support options. Wouldn't really change anything about them. Honestly, I mean, One Vision's whole thing of giving them the ability to get super excited about exercising stuff just cracks me up, and I love it. It's actually a nice little OB64 reference there. Actually, technically, just a general Ogre Battle reference, because I forgot they can do that in March of the Black Queen, too. Shamans. Again, One Vision already did this. Give them the ability to fully control the weather. There we go. Done deal. Buccaneer. Was fine. Needed earlier access to guns, and needed less moves from making out with stuff, I think. I mean, I guess it kind of works for his character, but just like, dude, quit making out with everybody. I mean, it's just cool to have, like, a half-man, half-lizard-man kind of situation. I mean, if they're going to go for that, he might as well be a politician, but whatever. Still, would have been cool to see, you know, more come out of the pistol and sword kind of build. Generally speaking, when you get him, he's, like, he can equip guns, and he can equip swords, and he can do the whole dual-wield thing. And you're better off just doing 2 swords instead of sword and gun, so just, it would be cool to see him coming in with Fusilier skills. Anyway, moving on. Knight Commander was, I'm assuming, added in pretty late in development. But it works, honestly. It works for what they are, where they come from, what they do. They're just basically a combination of a bunch of different skills. This is her unique thing. It's her version of the Lord, basically. So yeah, it totally makes sense that she can use a bunch of weirdly specific skills from a bunch of other, you know, command-type units, from warriors to dragoons to whatever the hell else. I don't think there's really much you can change. It would be nice to see uniques getting their RT bonus removed, because that stuff did kind of feel a little bit dicey. You know, it was kind of like, hey, here's this cheat for your special people. Felt a little Mary Sue-ish. Not for her specifically, but whatever. Alright. Dragonborn didn't exist in that one. Sacred Fist did not exist. Geomancer did not exist. Blade Knight did not exist. Voidmancer did not exist. Commando did not exist. Headhunter did not exist. Hoplite. Beautiful, perfect baby, and I love it. Maybe make it a little bit faster, but honestly, it's fine. Would be cool to see more of them available earlier. Juggernaut, very fun to play around with. Would have been... they're a little bit slow, but whatever. That's fine. Would have been cool to see them get Berserk, but honestly, I don't think they'll change this one much. Familiar, way too much crossover with the... between the 2 different versions. They should have done, again, the One Vision thing, separated fairies and gremlins into separate classes, given them their own things instead of giving them the confusingly named, like, exactly same name spells with opposite effects. it's very confusing to keep track of. There's already enough confusing stuff in this game. Warden didn't exist. Okay, dragons in general. I mean, I guess just monster units in general. Honestly, I liked how they were done. I really like the idea of just this crazy high armor, you know, threatening heavy unit. But it would be cool to see them have more of a presence. Because that was kind of their issue. If you had a Dragoon, they were a complete non-issue. If you didn't, they were just kind of a punching bag. Like, a lot of the time, a lot of their moves were fairly ineffectual, honestly. It's just, for whatever reason, they took out the T-shaped breath move. Which is odd, because that's how they were in the other two Tactics Ogre games. It was apparently just something that they couldn't program in for some reason. Now, the reason that that's a threat is because it changes the way that you have to do formations, because most of the maps you form everybody up and, you know, they're just as they are. You have a line of units that can take hits, you have the ones behind them that can't. And so the way that the Dragon Breath ends up turning that around is they go up to your front line, and it's like, oh, these guys can take hits, huh? Okay, well, we're going to give one of them a hit, and then we're going to hit 3 guys behind them. How does that sound? So it kind of threw that out the window. In favor of, like, the cannon moves. So I really hope that they just put back the original breath moves, because the cannon moves they're an OB64 reference, but I don't like it. I just feel like the straight breath move definitely served their purposes a lot better. Also, the one vision thing of giving them a ability to temporarily fly definitely added a lot to their flavor. So my throat is really not holding up right now, so we've just got the last 5 to cover here. Right, Hydras. They need some defense. Them suckers have, like, no frickin' defense. They either need a speed boost or they need a defense boost, something. Like, it feels like even in one vision, like, they became more threatening, but it's still not like, oh crap, that's a Hydra, that thing's rare, and I'm scared of it. It's always like, oh, that's a Hydra, that thing's about to be extinct. So, anyway. Golems, I kind of like their vanilla version, most of all, because they're friggin', like, they're just a wall. They're just a brick wall. So, nice little fun thing there. They're generally unassuming, and something that you generally will end up overlooking the value of until it's too late. They're very much like, I feel like what they need is to basically be promoted to the equivalent of, like, the XCOM 2 Shield Bearer, where they have all this hard armor, but at the same time, if they get up to the front, like, they end up giving a, like, let's say a Fortify boost to everybody within range, like, where they're just taking that Protector goal more and more, which technically extend force or something, whatever the hell their Rampart Aura 5 situation is, or broaden force, there we go. I mean, I guess technically kind of it's already there, but it just would be cool to see, you know, these guys taken up to 11 there. Their only issue is just they oftentimes can just be completely circumvented, so it would be cool to see them have more of a lingering effect there. Griffins are already fast and threatening as they are. Give them back Hurricane. One Vision did that, so whatever. As per always, just do the one vision thing. Cockatrice, same thing as the dragons. Give them back their proper breath move. Octopus. See, one vision took away their ability to use Aqua Veil, but the Aqua Veil and Poison Rain combo just made them really threatening, and I like that. Actually, another thing, take away the throwing boulder, because for the player, it became completely broken to abuse the throwing boulder for all these guys. And it became really weird to see the AI just constantly counter-bouldering, but never using it as a direct attack. OV gave them the ability to use it as a direct attack, but I think just removing the boulder entirely is I guess it takes away from their threat somewhat, but it's just, I don't know, it looks weird. I never really cared for it much, but anyway. So, that's that. Technically we could go into other stuff like Death Knights or whatever else, but we're, I think we're about where we can be for today. My voice is really giving out here. Hopefully this cold will be done eventually. I guess one last note here for the Death Templar. Please give him back Atropos. like, let's not beat around the bush here. He 100% got Atropos and Knight of Lotus. Just give him the move. So, hi there. Quick little interjection here because, well, I kind of messed up when doing this the first time because I actually ended up missing a few. Namely, well, we've got, I think I covered Fusiliers already, but just in case, we'll cover Fusiliers again, but the Songstress, the Angel, the Wish, and the Buccaneer didn't end up actually getting properly covered. So, alright, let's do this thing real quick. So, Fusiliers, I mean, main thing that really needed to change was just... Actually, no, I did cover that one. They needed, like, a undead bullet for their... just replace Sharpshoot with basically the equivalent of Silver Bullet from One Vision, and there you go. Done deal. Alright, Songstress was a bit of a weird one. So, you may have potentially wondered... Again, I've covered this a few times, but you may have potentially wondered why the hell they have stuff like Spellcraft and Spell Strike, despite the fact that they can't actually learn any spells, and their songs are not damaging. And, basically, the deal was if you go over to their instruments, as well as I believe many of the daggers that they can use, they've got tier 3 missiles on there. So basically, the idea is they're supposed to be like an artificer kind of deal. Is it perfect? No, not by any means. But yeah, let's see. How long is it till they get these? Quite a decent while, but you get the idea. A lot of the items that they can use essentially have all these different spells on them. So, for example, you know, going dual daggers with a Songstress might be more for spellcasting abilities than anything else. So, it's an interesting idea for a class. They never really explained that, though. Again, I never really realized it until doing the multiplayer tests. So, for one thing, either explain that or do something more with it. I would expect that they probably just gave her those abilities. It's what One Vision did, and I'm sure it's what Reborn's going to end up doing. Personally, I like the idea of the whole Artificer thing, but I wish that they would explain it more, you know? So yeah, probably just need to make that a little bit more obvious. Maybe have her, now that they actually have them showing up at their presumably proper level, you know, maybe just have them showing up, and, like, let's say they already got the Timbre on them or something like that, wherein, you know, they're essentially getting getting some of their abilities just right off the bat, so you can kind of get an idea. Like, maybe you see them in the fight, and they're like, oh, look, they're casting from their instrument, or they're using those daggers as, you know, a gun, basically. So that'd be a fun little way to do it. Basically, they just need a small tutorial. I feel like a lot of classes in this game would have benefited a lot from something that FFTA 2 learned after FFTA. Namely, that if you've got a bunch of these fancy cool classes, it really helps if your actual introduction mission actually introduces something about that class. Well, with the exception of the Dragoon, and, oh, that was loud. With the exception of the Dragoon and those ones, where for some reason they just felt like the introduction mission always needed to involve them getting absolutely steamrolled before anything interesting happened. Anyway, point being, it needed a better intro. So, maybe just have her take part in her own fight. Maybe when her boss fight happens, have her, instead of just cheating in abilities for her, have her actually, you know, use specialized instruments and whatever else as weapons, you know, like magical casting weapons kind of thing. Yes, it would give her an ammo limit effectively, but, you know, I feel like that'd be a better approach. She was never exactly a difficult boss fight, especially with a fully kitted out party. I mean, there were other mechanics to that fight. I'm just saying, like, her as a boss themselves were never the most crazy difficult, so it would be cool to see them going and using those item abilities in fight. Anyway, will they change that? Time will tell. I hope they do. Alright. Next up, Angels are, as always, a bit of an odd duck. Basically, right off the bat, they're incredibly annoying to get a hold of. I'm assuming they're probably going to bring back their original transformation thing, which is basically, originally, if you had a character that met the requirements and they died, they became an angel. Now, before that, angels were always female, then they became a male and female thing. So, presumably, it's just going to be if they've got the right alignment and, you know, they've got the right stats, then they just die and they become an angel. It would be the better way to do it. The whole finding the ensanguined root and taking it to a particular level, but then realizing you have to go back to Palace of the Dead and then removing all of the skin off the zombie in order to make them into a skeleton, and in order to then go back and have them rebuilt as an angel was... It was asinine. Nobody figured that out. I guarantee you nobody figured that out. How would you figure that out? It was not a great system there. So hopefully they bring back the original system for those. Skill-wise, they're honestly kind of fine. It's just that the AI needed the ability to actually use those skills, because they actually were a very effective multiplayer unit that never really got a chance to shine. Namely, the whole doing great against large mobs of undead thing, really potentially handy in a lot of cases. They did need more weapon options. Quite frankly, it's a little disappointing that they took away their ability to use spears. Just why? But yeah, just having more weapon options for them would be nice. The fact that one of their songs removed the zombie status from enemies, but you could never use it unless it was you using it. Like, if you set them on AI, they would never use it. It would be a really handy thing, again, if multiplayer is making a comeback, to have that as a thing. Because there is effectively a situation where, you know, multiplayer teams can have a lot of undead units on there as a strategy, and it's a very difficult to counter strategy, but either way, let the AI actually use its abilities. That's kind of the main takeaway there. Given the smaller list and why they originally did the smaller list, I would assume we're probably going to see a return to that. But aside from that, really all they needed was increased weapon options, so, you know, that would be kind of handy there. Other than that, honestly, they were already pretty decent as is. Just annoying to get a hold of. Alright, next up is the Wish. Just make them easier to recruit. Again, I appreciate a interesting side quest kind of thing. Grinding for an item the game never tells you about. Which, by the way, there's actually a lottery going on if you do pre-orders off of their store exclusively. Where I guess they're handing out 500 glass pumpkins. Honestly, I would have appreciated if they changed that number to some variant of 30. If it's going to wind up that we need to get 500 glass pumpkins in order to recruit her now. Oh boy, I think people are going to riot. But either way, the class is perfectly fine as is. I mean, they've got good access, they've got good abilities. There's nothing wrong with this class at all. I mean, even One Vision barely changed them. They fit the character, they fit their overall role. They're an endgame hidden powerhouse, basically, so they do that job well. And, I mean, they're quirky on top of that, but just, yeah, the requirements... It's not so much that, you know, they were impossible to achieve. I kind of appreciate the dragon part of it, because you have to go through all of these different things to pick up all these different types of dragons and whatever. It's... The pumpkins make no sense. Like, they do, but they don't. Like, I get it, you know, in KOL, like, it was a bit of a different thing where you basically found a bunch of them in the field, and it was either you keep this super good defensive item, or you trade 4 of them to unlock her, and it was like, well, you know, you're basically trading a finite resource in order to get something like that, and then they brought her back in the remake, and they're like, no, you need 30 of them now, and you can only grind them out from a few enemies, and it's going to be boring as hell to do. So it wasn't interesting. They needed to make that more interesting some way. Like, honestly, if they had something along the lines of, like, you could only get glass pumpkin drops from Heaven Generals or something, that'd be way more interesting. But either way. And I'm not saying, like, a random amount of them. I mean, like, you literally would... You make it a thing. Like, you have to go, you know, literally fight heaven and hell in order to get enough glass pumpkins to go and recruit her or something. And then just make it automatic. Don't just be like, well, you have to sell them at this particular time or else you've wasted that entire effort. Because, yes, I've had that happen before. So, either way, hopefully they can make that make a bit more sense. Buccaneer, aside from the uncomfortable amount of makeout moves this dude gets, and aside from the fact that... actually, no, I think we did cover Buccaneer. Like, it does seem like they have a little bit too much carryover with Gremlin and stuff like that, but overall, I mean, their skill set is fine. They... It would be nice for him to come in with ranked up Fusils so that he can do the whole sword and pistol thing a bit better. A little bit of a shame that he's got the whole pirate build available, but he comes in with basically no rank in Fusils. So yeah, that'd be cool to see there. Also, I'm not really sure why he's got some of these other options aside from if you're transferring Canopus or something into it. Which that would be the other thing. Let this class learn dual wield innately. It's something that they could transfer over, but basically you had to you had to transfer dual wield into a class that would combine with a Hawkman, and then combine that Hawkman with Canopus, and then turn Canopus into a Buccaneer in order to get him to dual wield. It was kind of backwards. It was the same thing for Fusils as well. So again, cool as a hidden in the background thing, but kind of a pain in the neck for very little benefit. So there's that. Oh, I don't think... Did we seriously never cover the Necromancer? Okay, I guess that's a thing, too. Alright, originally, I thought they needed more to them. After doing the multiplayer tests, I think they're fine as is, and even fine as far as where you recruit them. Because you can get them in Chapter 3. There's basically a guy that you can't steal class marks from, but you can recruit that particular Necromancer. And I like the one vision approach, where you can get... Again, it improved everything. Like, if you get to the Nimbuth fight early in one vision, you have a rogue that you can get in Chapter 1, and basically you can steal marks from him. But also, if you ace those undead maps, you get a suite of early Necromancer abilities, which basically just lets you access the class far earlier than you normally would be able to, as well as actually be able to use them. The issue with the vanilla Chapter 3 Necromancer that you could get is just the fact that you literally could not use them as anything other than, like, if you transferred other caster stuff into them. Like, if your existing caster died and you had them go into the Necromancer there, then they could actually do something. Otherwise, this guy was extraordinarily limited, extremely flimsy, and basically just didn't have much going for him until you ended up getting into Palace of the Dead anyway. So... they were just kind of there as your token Necromancer, more or less, and that was about it. So yeah, I guess that's about that for those ones. And I guarantee there will be some I missed. So, alrighty then. Alright, take care. Bye. Anyway, that'll be that. Take care. I hope this was at least somewhat interesting, and, feel free to drop all arguments in the comments as you do. And, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully we'll have more information at some point to actually report on. Alright, take care. Bye.